So, to me, my understanding of identity was it is moved in the literature, not my meaning. It is moved from focus on the individual to how the individual is shaped by surroundings as such. In other words, the socio-cultural framework. To me, identity is simple. It's how we see ourselves and how others see us. So at that level. It's also manifested in how we enact different roles in different settings. Informal roles such as you are members of this audience, you will never be a member of this audience again, thankfully says you. To more formal roles such as a doctor or a teacher. And I'm interested in the teacher aspect, and I'm interested in the functional roles, all the functional roles a teacher plays in their job. The research tells us that teacher role identity forms a foundation for many of the teacher's actions inside and outside the classroom. Now, if I ask you a question, oh, somebody's in pain out there. If I ask you a question now, what is the role of a teacher, an ESL teacher? Well, we can come up with many different roles. Do you realize that I could find no teacher role identity benchmarks or standards or task descriptors when I start reviewing the literature in the last year? None that I'm aware of. If you are, let me know. None that have been produced by any type of research. They're all anecdotal. When I do a talk on this, in fact, I ask people, and then I've come up with a whole lot of anecdotal ones I made up myself. Jazz chanter, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I mean, the work of an ESL or EFL teacher. Well, there's a reason. They're very difficult to isolate or measure. How do you measure? How do you figure out what a role is? And the other thing which interests me even more is teachers don't readily consciously reflect on their role identities. And they're not encouraged in programs. So, recently, I was interested in this topic. And when novice teachers, ESL teachers reflect, what do they communicate about their role identity as ESL teachers? And this brings me to the replication of my dissertation, of one of them anyway. I've been working with 3 novice teachers recently in Canada for 1 semester. They had a job in the Language Institute in our university, and they volunteered to meet me once a week, and we have classroom observations, and they write journals. Isn't that fantastic in itself? And I didn't bribe them, honestly I didn't. I mean, maybe I gave them donuts every time or something like that. And they faithfully came, and it was fascinating. And by the way, this was not my question. I wasn't studying this. It was a general, reflection on their work. Let's see what comes up. So, as I said, we had group meetings, interviews, observations, journal writing. So I came up with 12,000 lines of text that we transcribed all of what occurred. And together with a research assistant, we scanned all the data, and we were looking for incidents related to role identity, such a teacher is, or something around a teacher, either explicit or implicit, that was built into sentences. And after that, I came up with what I call a taxonomy of novice ESL teacher role identity. 16 novice teacher roles divided into 3 major clusters. But the 16, actually, there were originally 35. And I kept scanning the data for as long as I could put up with it, and I collapsed some into the others, etc. And probably there's overlap between them. But I came up with this, and I'd like to share them with some of them. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'd like to share them all with you. The 3 cluster was manager, teacher as acculturator. I believe we coined a new word here, and teacher as professional. So inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and inside the teacher's head, as such. That's the way I divided them up. And if you see there, manager has a communication controller, arbitrator, motivator, presenter, acculturator, volunteer, friend, socializer, care provider, professional, novice, follower, unique, collaborator, learner. I'll go through a few of them with you. Manager attempts to control the classroom. Communication controller attempts to control classroom communication interaction, turn-taking, etc. Arbitrator offers feedback, positive and negative in the classroom. Motivator motivates the student to learn, keeps the students on task. Presenter delivers information. I'd like to give you one example only from this. I have all different types of examples. Presenter, I know you, don't worry about that. Communication controller. As I said, attempts to control communication in the room. One of the teachers invited me to observe 20 minutes of her class in which she was going to have full interaction with all the students. And of course I never say no. And what we decided that I would do a score analysis. Are you familiar with seating chart observation record? I would assume that IUP people would be, hopefully. But it's you plot communication in the classroom, who asks who questions, etc. You can draw lines. You can do it any way you like. It's a very non-judgmental instrument, and it's very good because it's easy to administer at the back. And plus, if you're taping it, you can revisit the tape if you want it, depending on how much detail you want. So I did this. I decided that I would do a score analysis with the teacher's permission for 20 minutes interaction. And here's what happened. And by the way, there was no, we didn't have a pre-chat or anything like that. She said, just come in and see what you see. And I said, fine. And so this is the score analysis. I'll give you a moment to have a look at that. Now, okay, don't read the bottom here for the moment. Just look at that. You all read it, right? If you look over here, you see M. M is from a particular country. M manipulated the conversation. And up here as well, M means male, by the way, and F means female, rather than getting into names or countries or anything like that.
Or it's Igor.
So you have the teacher asked 194 questions in 23 minutes. I don't think the CIA actually have such a high standard. But 8 questions a minute is quite a lot. But also M here, 67, manipulated the teacher completely. 34% of the talking time within 23 minutes with this particular student. And so if you look around, the other students are relatively, this is a speaking class, relatively quiet. Now, the interesting thing after it is I gave it to the teacher, and the teacher was totally unaware of it. I said, did you read? Well, he did speak a bit, all right. And yeah, well, a bit, right? And I thought, well, this is fascinating. And I thought, I said, well, what would you like to do with it? And she said, let's bring it back to the group. Remember, it's a group of 3 teachers. So we brought it back to the group. And the topic of that group discussion was dealing with dominant students. And the group came up with a fascinating idea of how to deal with this. And it's called the talking sticks. Have you ever heard of talking sticks? To control who and what? Okay, this is in the teacher's own words as well. 2 sticks to each student. As soon as they start speaking, they give it to the teacher. They have only 2 possible turns to speak. After they had handed over the stick, then I said, sorry, all done. Okay? By the way, she invited me to observe that class as well, and I did the score analysis, and here's the score analysis. How to transform your class, the communication in your class. It's fascinating, yeah. Okay, the teacher asked 35 questions. One of the most interesting things was, when the talkers gave in the first stick, they realized, wait a minute, I've only one more stick. I ain't giving back the stick until I finish talking. So sustained sentences, they kept on and on and on. That was the first, yes, very interesting. And the quiet person was, the dominant person was a bit angry, but that's okay. Interesting. The so-called quiet students, this teacher a novice teacher had interpreted that these students were weak, or their English was actually better than the dominant students. They were so happy. The shy and quiet students they came up to her afterwards and they said they thanked her. They said that they were happy that she included them in the class, and she did something specifically to include them. But their English was actually much better, and they were from Japan and Korea. Korea, yeah. Okay, but that's the power of observation. That's the power of reflective practice. One small change like that. The group came up with this. I didn't come up with it. I never heard of talking sticks before. It is fascinating. The score analysis is fascinating as well. Acculturator, another one too. Volunteer, gives time. Notice that, gives time to outside the class, organize activities. Some are expected, some are required. Friend, socializer, care provider. I'm not sure if any of these are strange for you or whatnot. The ALI might have a few of these, I don't know. But I give you an example of volunteer. Gives time. That was a gun to their head. in Canada, pumpkin carving is popular. So one of the teachers came back to the group. She was really pissed. That means not happy. And she said, they asked for volunteers, and I said I might as well volunteer for the trip considering the number of emails I received. But sometimes I don't want to volunteer. If you don't volunteer, you're unpopular, which means you won't get another contract in another language. Another teacher said, you are volunteered. You're signed up for outings. I was signed up to the pumpkin farm, okay? They forced me to volunteer. Okay, this is going to play into something I'm going to talk about afterwards. Okay, professional then, novice, follower, unique, collaborator, learner. Some of them may be obvious. Unique to me was quite an interesting finding. Unique. I discovered that these teachers were afraid of losing their identity as an individual teacher. And so this is what one teacher said. I want to be an individual. I don't want to be just part of a faculty where everybody is getting the same. They had to submit lesson plans. I want them to come away with the same skills, but I want to do it with my teaching style. Now they're newly minted teachers, newly qualified teachers, you know, but they felt constrained by the rules in the institution, such as submit your lesson plans. And they really objected to that, and attend meetings and do this and whatnot. And they had to follow the course outline religiously. And their interpretation of that was they were being constrained. But as we all know, experienced teachers, you give me interchange and I'll do it my way anyway. It doesn't really matter who gives me what. You're a teacher in the room, you're going to do it, whatever. Okay, so unique was an interesting finding, but I'm only giving you snippets, I'm not giving you more details. Another finding, acculturator. This came up with my 3 experienced teachers as well, and I realized that actually this role, teacher role, makes TESOL people unique. In other words, EFL is, let's say I went to teach in Korea, which I did. You become, you know, social mediators, informants, cultural, you know, expert. But ESL teacher, look at how many people who came to ALI first time. Your ESL teachers, many times they're the first contact for newcomers, and you have to have all this knowledge, and your role then is acculturator. Interestingly enough, in Canada, one of the experienced teachers, I was getting a pair of sneakers about 5 p.m. and one of the experienced teachers that I was working with in the group, she came in with 2 Korean students, and she drove 40 kilometers into this store to buy them boots for the snow. She came in with them to buy the boots for the snow. It was fascinating. Class ended at 2 p.m. and she had a family. And she was shopping with them and all, and she said, no, I like to do this. She said, well, who else do they know in Canada? Do math teachers do that? Science teachers? Not to my knowledge. So this to me is, I mean, this is an important point. Okay, what does all this mean? Yes, I realize that it's a subjective group conceptualization of the roles that emerge from the group discussions. I realize that. But my original meaning for doing it was to raise awareness with the teachers that these roles exist. The next step is to consider the impact of these roles on them at this particular moment. In other words, do they configure, for what they think a professional ESL teacher is or not? And it's up to them individually to figure this out. But in order to do that, they must enter the matrix. You knew I'd come up with something like this.